My four best non-family friends are Grant, Aaron, Jill, and Amber. Grant is a domestic law attorney. He is my doubles partner in tennis and 5 years older than I am. We have had many discussions about divorce, reconciliations, and married people's expectations and viewpoints. We've discussed these over lunches and drinks at the tennis club, as spectators at sporting events, and during card games with other men. Aaron is a psychologist. We've run a number of charity events together, and together we coach our son's basketball team and our daughter's soccer team. Aaron is the same age as Grant, 5 years older than I am, despite the fact that his son and daughter are the same age as mine, and good friends with my kids. We, too, have talked about divorce, reconciliations, male-female expectations, and the psychology of marriage sometimes with Grant, if Aaron joins our card-playing group, many times just the two of us. Jill is a marriage counselor and my partner in mixed pickleball. Jill is 3 years older than I am and is also good friends with my wife, Marie. In addition to meeting on the pickleball court and during lunches, Jill enjoys hiking almost always with Marie and Jill's husband, but on some occasions by ourselves. We also have had many discussions about divorce and reconciliation. Amber is 3 years younger than I am. I met Amber when I saved her from a bad situation. She maintains that I saved her life, but I think that is an over-dramatization. Anyway, we became friends, and she also became friends with Marie. Amber is a public and media relations expert and probably has more friends and acquaintances than anyone else that I know. The medical organization that I work for has, upon my recommendation, used her for public and media relations a couple of times with great success. I probably talk on the phone or text her at least every other day, and she often comes over to our house on weekends and we socialize with her and, if she has one, her date. There is one other thing about Amber which I am the only one of her real friends who knows. She is a part-time high-end escort. How I found that out is another story that I won't get into now. But our relationship is such that she knows that I don't judge her, so sometimes she even talks to me about it. She is single, but because of how many people she knows and her part-time job, which she enjoys, we often talk about married people's relationships and expectations. If I were ever to cheat on Marie, I have no desire to do that and can't even imagine doing that. I would love it to be with Amber, because she is the best-looking woman I know and she has a sparkling personality. Even if I were inclined to cheat, however, which I most definitely am not, it would never happen with her because she would believe that it might ruin or strain our friendship, and that is the last thing that she wants. Going back to her belief that I once saved her life and have often given her good advice about things she asked my input on. All four of my knowledgeable friends tell me that while there are exceptions, the two most common situations they know about when one spouse has cheated is seeing things with blinders on so that no compromise is possible and divorce ensures, or the wronged spouse so lacks self-confidence that reconciliation is sought regardless of the circumstances. In either case, the basic situation is black and white. In other words, there is no gray area. Of course, there are exceptions, but according to my friends, both spouses take a gray approach in only about 10 to 20% of the cases. I often wondered what my take would be if I was a cheated-on spouse. All of Grant, Aaron, and Jill have told me that. I've never actually discussed it with Amber, but from other things she's said, I'm sure that her take would be the same. You can't know until you experience it. I would like to think that I would be one of the gray thinkers, but wouldn't know until it actually happened. All four of my friends advise me that hard, uncompromising divorce usually doesn't work out for the non-cheater. The non-cheater finds a better spouse only about 25% of the time and either settles or finds no one suitable at all 75% of the time. The cheater doesn't normally have a future life of regret and deprivation like the non-cheater would like to believe will happen, but also doesn't do great 75% of the time. The other 25%, they almost completely bounce back. In cave-in reconciliation cases, the non-cheater usually feels inadequate and embarrassed by their appeasement if they stick it out and often ends up divorcing within 5 years anyway. Again, things aren't great for either the cheater or non-cheater. Most don't ultimately live a good life afterward, but don't end up penniless and hopeless either. The bottom line, usually black or white isn't the answer. A gray outlook has the best probability for success. My name is Sam Buttrey. At the start of the substance of this tale, I was 35 years old and worked for a large medical organization as a supervisory medical laboratory professional. I have a BSc degree in medical laboratory science from the University of Cincinnati, a master's degree in medical laboratory administration from Virginia Commonwealth University, and an ASCP certification. Marie Buttrey, also 35, and I had been married 11 years, with 2 kids, Jimmy and Julie. Marie worked in pharmaceutical sales. That alone will tell you that she's good-looking and smart, although it's not fair. Pharmaceutical companies only hire good-looking sales reps. Aside from being smart and good-looking, Marie is in good physical condition. She and I work out either together or separately, at least 4 times a week, and we both have above-average musculature and stamina. I enjoyed being married to Marie. We seemed to be compatible in almost every way. I would rate our intimate life as better than a 9 out of 10, and our companionship as close to a 10. Marie is a good mother who gives our kids genuine love and attention without overdoing it. While we have some divisions of labor that are along the lines of sexual expectations, we try as best as possible to divide up all chores equally and both participate in both kids' activities. I attend all of Julie's ballet recitals and take her to practice more often than Marie does, and Marie takes Jimmy to all of his basketball practices, and I meet him there to coach his recreational basketball team with Aaron, and we have similar approaches to Julie's soccer and Jimmy's band and other activities. In general, I have a very good life. It's a life I wanted to keep. At the start of my tale, my life was about 99% of what I considered ideal. Until the seminal part of this story, I never considered what percentage of ideal I'd take before making difficult wholesale changes. I realized that I didn't have a 99% optimum life one day in May, shortly after Marie's 35th birthday. It was a Saturday, and Marie had gotten back from the health club late. I was due to coach Julie's soccer team in a game in about 30 minutes, and Jimmy needed to get to band practice. She came in somewhat frazzled from her car with her pharmaceutical sample case and gym bag, hustled Jimmy to the car and gave me a quick kiss and Julie a hug, and good luck. After the whirlwind left the house while Julie was getting her jersey and shorts on, I went to move Marie's pharmaceutical case from where she had virtually thrown it on a living room couch and put it in her home office. She might not have securely latched it. The latch may have been disturbed when she tossed it on the couch, or there may have been some other problem, but when I hurriedly picked it up to move it, the case flopped open and papers spilled out. Fortunately, her drug samples were in secure sections in her case and didn't spill out since I wouldn't have known where to replace them. The papers were all loose, so I didn't think that putting them back in some order would be critical. As I collected the papers strewn about the floor mixed with her brochures and order forms were 4 cards. 1 was a sappy birthday card from me, 2 were homemade cards from the kids, and the 4th was a card that on the front said, "Happy birthday to a fine pizza," with a color drawing of a slice of pepperoni pizza, and on the inside it said, "And Playmate," with the words, "Most Fun," handwritten between and Playmate, and a shadow female form bending over. The inside was signed, "With enjoyment, Rob." I was stunned. While I didn't actually know who Rob was, I suspected. Over the last 2 months or so, Marie was training a new sales rep named Rob to take over part of her territory while she assumed most of the territory of a sales rep who had gotten pregnant and left. I took photos of the exterior and interior of Rob's card. Then I put all of the papers back in Marie's case with the cards underneath the rest of the documents, latched the case tightly, and put it back on the living room couch rather than bringing it into Marie's office. It took only 5 minutes on Marie's company's local website to get his name and photo. Robert Driscoll. He looked to be no more than 25 years old. He was good-looking, maybe even a little better looking than normal for such a rep. In fact, he looked very much like the guy that Marie had been dating when I swept her off her feet, according to her. By then, Julie was anxious to get to her game, so we got in my car and sped off. I engaged her in conversation the entire way, to keep my mind off what I had just found out and had shaken me to the core. I somehow was able to make it through Julie's game without throwing up, embarrassing myself or acting like the Sphinx, although I did defer more to Aaron than I normally do for substitutions and strategy. All the girls were happy when we won 4-3. Afterward, Aaron and his daughter Julie and I, Julie's best friend on our team, and a girl on the other team who was a good friend of Aaron's daughter, went for milkshakes. While everyone was having a good time at the table and yucking it up while sipping their milkshakes, I excused myself and called Grant's cell phone. Grant answered on the first ring. "You better not be wimping out of our doubles match tomorrow, Boris," he answered without even a hi. He calls me Boris, referencing Boris Becker, a former German pro who is considered the 11th best male tennis player of all time. I hope that he calls me that because he thinks that I look just like Becker, 6'3" tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, very good looking, or because of my tennis ability, and not because Boris was convicted of tax evasion after he retired. "No, I'm not, bozo. How do I retain you to just ask some questions so that we have an attorney-client relationship and you can't divulge even the questions to others?" I asked. "This isn't a joke?" he replied after a pause of a few seconds. "No," I responded a little more forcefully than I intended. "Okay, we reach an oral agreement to that effect now. Tomorrow you give me $1 after our doubles match, and I will email you a contract to sign Monday, okay?" "Agreed," I quickly retorted. "Okay, what questions?" "Just one for now. Who would you recommend as the best private investigator?" After a pregnant pause, he inquired, "Why do you want to know?" "You don't get to ask me questions at this time, only answer them." "Okay," he droned. "Wesley Associates. I'll give you one of their cards tomorrow." "Thanks," I said. "I'll be ready for tennis at 8 a.m. Bring your A game." Then I terminated the call. That night, Marie acted entirely normal for a Saturday with both the kids and me, including letting it be known after the kids went to bed that she wanted to simulate a couple of bonobos. I can't really say what was going through my mind when I was eating and then being intimate with her that night. While I almost sleepwalked through the first set in doubles tennis the next morning, I snapped out of it during the second set and actually played my most aggressive tennis in years, and Grant and I won against a good team, 2-6, 6-3, 6-1. Gant did give me the card for Wesley Associates, and I gave him $1. Grant didn't ask any questions, but as we left the court area, he sincerely said, "If you need to talk, whether as your attorney or your friend, let me know." I thanked him and drove home. That night, Marie and I had a virtual repeat of the bonobo simulation of the night. Wesley and Associates, in the form of operatives Annabelle Watson and William Bennett, justified Grant's recommendation of them. With the information that I gave them within 2 weeks, they gave me a complete report. Unfortunately, I can't say that the report was what I wanted, but it was almost what I expected. 10 days after I put the private investigator on the case, after Marie and Rob exited a sales call at a doctor's office in a suburb about 15 miles from our house, they decided to take lunch at a Motel 6 rather than at an Olive Garden. They were in room 117 for 1 hour, 3 minutes. Wesley has high-tech equipment, and Annabelle and William are smart and sneaky, so I got some photos taken through a window where the curtains were not completely closed, and a lot of audio. After I surreptitiously reviewed the evidence and paid my $4,215 bill, I came to the conclusion that the intimacy between them was recreational. I don't want to explain why in detail, but a couple of reasons were because they almost never kissed. as best as could be determined from the audio and certainly not at any time when visually observed by Annabelle or William. And because Marie said nothing about me that was in the least bit negative, and Rob never criticized his girlfriend. To confirm my conclusion, I called Annabelle and William after my review, told them what my conclusion was, and asked if, in their experience, they agreed. "That's certainly what it seemed like to me in the 2 weeks that I observed them, not just in Motel 6, Annabelle stated. "I have to agree with her," William chimed in. To double-check, I made an appointment with a female marriage counselor who was a friend of Jill's who I had met several times and gave her the information I had without expressing my conclusion. While stating a number of caveats to cover her back, she agreed with my assessment. This was especially so since, to be truthful, I had to report that there was absolutely no difference in the way that Marie treated me, the kids, or any of our mutual friends. Now that I had the information I needed, the question was, what to do? I decided to take a gray approach, which all of my 4 closest non-family friends recommended long before my problem arose. This included considering how much my optimum life had been degraded, what was best for me, what was best for my kids, what was best for my parents and friends, and even what was best for Marie. The conclusions I reached were: 1. I could not let Marie's affair with Rob continue. 2. If I directly confronted Marie, it would definitely harm our future relationship. We would never be 99% whole again. If we worked on it, we might make it back to 80%, maybe if we were lucky, 85%, but never to 99%. 3. The kids could never know. While they were now too young to appreciate it, there obviously would come a day when they would. I didn't want that day to ever come. 4. I didn't want to harm Marie physically, emotionally, or mentally, except that I wanted her to think that I might have found out even if I never confronted her, so that she would have angst for a long time. 5. I wanted Rob to pay. I had a caveman visceral type reaction to him. What I really wanted to do was to beat the ever-loving shit out of him. I wanted to crush his with a couple of swift kicks with steel-toed boots, like in some fantasies online. But I knew that it had to be more refined, but long-lasting. It could not entail telling his girlfriend, because then Marie would eventually find out. 6. If I could get revenge on Rob, if I could plant a seed with Marie that I knew but never confronted or accused her, and she never knew for sure, then I could see my life eventually getting back to 90% or more of optimal and 100% for the kids. 7. I wanted to act fast. I didn't want there to be even one more liaison between Marie and Rob. Now that I had all of the parameters set, the question was, what specifically to do? Since I work for a medical company and supervise a lab, I know lots about medications, viruses, bacteria, and other materials that end up in bloodstreams, and what effect they have on a human body. After reviewing all of the information that I had, my first inclination turned out to be the best one. I would infect Rob with both herpes simplex virus 1, HSV1, and herpes simplex virus 2, HSV2. Both can show symptoms within 2 to 12 days. If a particularly virulent strain of HSV1 is used, it can almost be certain that it will outwardly manifest itself within 2 to 4 days. I needed to find a way to infect Rob so that he would show obvious symptoms within 2 to 4 days while being sure that Marie wasn't infected. I rehired Annabelle and William to do a deep dive on Rob and tried to figure out a way to be sure that Marie never had a chance to be infected by him until he had obvious symptoms. Marie knows enough about medicine to easily recognize HSV1 and would avoid him like the plague, and would be nervous too. As it turns out, things worked out almost perfectly. The only part that didn't work out perfectly was that I was not able to prevent Marie and Rob from having another recreational escapade. They had one 13 days after the first one that Annabelle and William witnessed. This time it was after their last call of the day on a Tuesday at another suburban doctor's office at a Holiday Inn Express, room 142. This time they were in the room 57 minutes, and there was good audio but only 2 grainy photos. The audio was essentially no different than the first time and did not contradict my conclusion about recreational intimacy. The Thursday after the Tuesday encounter, Rob was in the locker room of a facility where he played squash. The out-of-town operative that I arranged for and paid over the internet and never had to personally meet with stumbled into Rob in the locker room and injected him with a high concentration of HSV-1 and HSV-2. I manufactured a problem at my office and with one of the kids to get Marie to stay home that Friday. She had only 2 appointments and was almost done with her training of Rob so he could handle them himself. I also lied that I had won a contest for a trip to Las Vegas, which I surprised Marie with. The surprise vacation for Marie and I was for that Saturday through Wednesday of the next week. To make the surprise contest win possible, I had already arranged with Marie's secretary to get the Monday to Wednesday appointments she had rescheduled, and for her parents and mine to take turns watching the kids, getting them to their weekend events, and off to and back from school on the weekdays. The quick trip to Vegas had the added benefit of enhancing Marie's and my sexual compatibility, which wasn't lacking to begin with, even though I was still having problems purging my mind of her relationship with Rob. Even though I didn't need them for normal escapades with Marie, I wanted to give her the sexual experience of her life, so I scored some little blue pills and a thin vibrator. Marie and I were intimate more times in the 4 nights and 5 days that we were in Vegas than in any 1-week period before in our lives. Marie left for work Thursday morning after our trip to Vegas as happy as I had ever seen her. She returned Thursday night nervous and almost morose. Of course I knew why. She saw the herpes break out on Rob's face, which Annabelle got a good couple of photos of without me disclosing anything about my out-of-town operative to her. Over the next week, Marie was like a long-tailed cat in a rocking chair factory. It was clear that she had gotten a blood test. Obviously not at my lab, although that was where Rob got his blood test, and was waiting for the results. Through subtle inquiries, I determined that she had no further relationship with Rob, and in fact, Rob had been terminated. I guess a pharmaceutical company doesn't like to have its sales reps making calls with herpes sores on their faces. Apparently, Rob recognized the symptoms as soon as he got his first breakout and immediately got treatment, so maybe it won't ruin his life forever. I could care less, one way or the other. I could tell the day that Marie got her negative blood tests back. It was the Wednesday a week after our trip to Vegas. She looked like the most relieved person in the world. She attacked me that night, having begged off intimacy since we got back from Vegas first, complaining of sexual fatigue from our capties there, and then an illness that she didn't want me to catch, causing her to even sleep in the guest room. I subtly tormented her for the next 2 weeks by letting her overhear conversations about someone getting fired from her office for having herpes. She didn't question how I found out, even though she didn't tell me, because the medical community is small and, as earlier indicated, my lab ran Rob's blood tests. For several weeks, she occasionally looked at me funny, wondering what I knew, but it never affected her actions. In fact, she seemed to make an effort to be even more affectionate and sexually available than normal. You may wonder how I spent all of the money that I had to spend without Marie finding out. The answer is fairly simple, despite the fact that considering the private investigators, the out-of-town operative, the trip to Vegas that supposedly I had won, and many other incidentals, it cost me more than $25,000. I borrowed the money from Amber, interest-free, with the agreement to pay it back gradually over 30 months. I could easily hide it over 30 months, but couldn't hide it over a period of 6 weeks. There was one caveat before Amber would loan me the money, however. She wanted to know why and promised never to disclose it to anyone. I trusted her. Especially, she still had that Pollyanna idea that I had saved her life, so I told her. I tried to tell her only the basics, but she eventually weaseled the entire story out of me over 2 days when Marie and the kids were on a short trip with her parents. I also told her that I may jettison Marie once the kids are off to college, if I can't completely forgive her. When she held $25,000 in cash in front of me, she said, "Here's the deal. You pay it back gradually over 30 months, but that's not the end of it. By the time that Julie's in college, I'll have given up my part-time job several years before that. If you jettison Marie, you and I become an item to see if we would be compatible over the long haul. Agreed?" I couldn't believe what she had just said. What it meant is that she had a subtle thing for me. And while she would never try to break up my marriage, if I did it myself, she wanted to try me out. "But you're younger than I am and may get married before that," I stammered. "Younger means nothing. The chances of me marrying someone besides you are small, but if it happens, we reassess at that time. Now, is it a deal, or do I put this money back under my mattress?" After a pause, I said, "Deal." Then, for the first time ever, Amber kissed me on the lips. It was no peck. It was a set-off-the-smoke-alarms kiss. My knees felt weak after she broke it off. "No more of that until Julie goes to college," she grinned, then shoved some of the cash down my pants, being sure to stroke my rock-hard Johnson in the process, dumped the rest on a table, and sauntered out. It's now 8 years after Rob got herpes and Marie got religion, so to speak. I do now consider myself to have a 90% optimum life, and I'm very glad, especially in view of how well my kids are doing, that I took a gray approach rather than a black or white one. I sometimes almost feel bad that I gave Rob herpes and got him fired. The reason that I ultimately have no guilt is because unless I did something about Marie's recreational intimacy with him because of my personality, I never would have been able to take the gray approach. Will I jettison Marie once Julie goes to college? At this point in time, I can't say. I do know that Amber remains in the background. Of course, I paid her loan back in less than 30 months, and I gave her a diamond tennis bracelet with the last payment. I haven't ever seen her since without the bracelet on. Just 2 days ago, when we were on a hike with a bunch of other people, including Marie, when we trailed behind the others at one point, Amber told me, "In case you're interested, I gave up my part-time job." I smiled at her. She smiled back. "Just 3 more years before Julie goes to college." She chuckled. Then I got the second plasma hot kiss of my life from her, and we quickly caught up with the rest of the hikers. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Melissa woke up confused on more than one level. Confused because she had no idea where she was, and confused because she had no recent memories. She tried opening her eyes, but quickly closed them again. The bright lights hurt. That is why it was her nose that solved the first riddle. It gave her the unmistakable smell of hospital. That solved one problem, although it didn't allay her confusion. With nose satisfied, it was the turn of her ears. She recognized the music that was playing. It was the nightly 7 p.m. news. She never missed it. It was a ritual at home that she and her husband always sat and watched together. Husband? Yes, I have a husband, she thought. Even in her confused state, she felt it was strange that whenever she tried to think of his name, her mind slid off it. Try pouring water onto a duck's back or a diamond. Yes, afterwards there is water everywhere, but the duck or diamond is perfectly dry. Finally, after much effort, she had it. Dave. As soon as she thought of the name, her mind rapidly threw it away as if it was a hot potato. Desperate to distract herself, she focused on the sound that had roused her. The music was gone. Now the newsreader was droning on. She quickly opened and shut her eyes to confirm there was a television on the wall, and then concentrated on her ears. We have received a DVD of his statement, but for legal reasons we can't show it. We can, however, read you excerpts from the transcript. A warning, parts of what follows may be offensive to younger viewers. To my darling wife, I hope my actions of today answer your questions of 3 weeks ago. Can we get past this? And can you forgive me? Clearly, my answer is no to both of those. To make the finances easy to understand, let me spell it out to you. I have canceled our car and medical insurance. I have paid off all the credit cards and canceled them. I have set up a trust to be the beneficiary of my life insurance, with my lawyer being the trustee. I added to this trust the entire contents of our bank accounts. When everything is settled, he has instructions to distribute everything to some nominated charities. Yes, I know this leaves the children with no inheritance, but they have finished their education, and I have given them the best possible start in life. I have no doubt they will be successful, and my conscience is clear. I have written to them all, explained my actions, and begged their forgiveness. No, I didn't leave out one brutal detail. I suggested that they take the example of your life from now as a lesson in why you should respect your loved ones. It is my second last lesson to them. I really wish I could be around to see how your life progresses. How will you explain yourself to our children, our friends, and the children of our friends? But by now you realize that is impossible for me to be there. For the record, I am not doing this because I am suffering from depression or anything like that. In fact, anyone analyzing my actions will see them as the product of an obviously sane and rational mind. Not that I didn't have a reason to be pushed into insanity. It is bad enough to catch your wife in bed with another man, but when she reacts by asking you to leave so they can continue, well, that could push even the strongest man over the edge. At this point, even Melissa couldn't delude herself that the words coming from the newsreader weren't aimed directly at her. She desperately forced her mind away from sensory input, but that backfired when her memory threw up visions of the incident in question. Dave had missed the monthly party of their close friend group. He was supposed to be covering the afternoon shift at the mine. She found out later that the shaft hoist had broken down, and without a second means of egress from underground, work was prohibited. The group of 9 couples had known each other for years and were all about the same stage in life, either childless or empty nesters. This month, Susan and Carl were the rotated hosts. From later research, Dave had entered the party and immediately inquired where Melissa was. Some had genuinely not known, others made excuses. Susan told him his wife wasn't there. It was Graham who gave the game away. He always was a terrible liar. He stammered out that he was ignorant of her whereabouts, but Dave didn't miss his eyes flicking up the stairs. 3 people had apparently tried to stop Dave's ascent, but to no avail. When he burst through the bedroom door, he saw Carl intimately engaged with her. That didn't stop her from opening her eyes to see her husband over Carl's shoulder. She had been holding off her climax as she knew from experience that Carl was close. In all their time together, they had never had simultaneous excitement, and it was a goal of hers. It is often said that the closest a sane person can get to insanity is in the moments before excitement. That is the only way Melissa could rationalize why she simply panted, "Go away," and shut her eyes in concentration. The moment for her was spoiled, however. Her climax was ruined. In mounting horror, he had joined Melissa in getting dressed and racing out to find Dave. He was gone. With this particular mental scene over, Melissa couldn't help her attention returning to the television. "To the media. Can I suggest you use this opportunity for some public service? You could follow my ex-wife and the others involved around for years to see the long-term effect on them. Hopefully, if it is brutal and pathetic enough, you could keep the lessons fresh in everyone's mind for a long time to come. A constant reminder of the potential consequences of disrespect. That is, unless the jerk takes the easy way out. I can't see that happening, though. Surely she can recognize the damage losing one parent will do and not want to compound it by the children losing both. Maybe the media can do a show on the socially correct way of ending a marriage as a counterpoint. To the people that make the laws in this country. I know we changed to no-fault divorces for reasons that seemed valid at the time, but surely it is time for a review. We now have data on the consequences of both the old and the new systems. Surely an independent review will spell out the wise way forwards, old, new, or a third path. Off the cuff, can I make a suggestion? Maybe keep no fault for couples with dependent children, but go back to the old system for couples without. Resurrect the system where cheaters are punished. All we have done with no fault is create an environment where if the primary caregiver murders their spouse's love and trust, they either end up with no consequences or are actually rewarded. That's exactly what it seemed like when my lawyer told me I would end up with less than half my assets as a reward for a lifetime of fidelity and a career of risking my safety and health to provide a superior lifestyle for the cheating woman. One request, though, wise ones. Make sure the review isn't influenced by the hairy armpit bull dyke brigade that seems to have an unhealthy control over our laws and is steadily advancing the cause of male subjugation. Also exclude those weak-willed, overly accommodating men who blindly support radical feminist agendas. As a last note to the lawmakers, if you keep allowing farmers to feed hormones to the animals we eat, then be prepared to have a society where gender confusion increases. Once again, Melissa's mind desperately tried to wander away from this horrible diatribe by reliving the past. After the party, Dave had disappeared for a few days, completely baffling all of her and Carl's attempts to find him. She felt no guilt about what she had done. It was all perfectly justifiable. Of course, she regretted the way Dave had discovered them, but that wasn't her fault. When he reappeared, she was quite prepared to be verbally torn to shreds. It was the medicine she knew she had to swallow. Instead, she was quite shocked by the hollow, lifeless hulk that appeared back in her life. Having had 4 days of peace to coordinate her defense, she launched it, explaining that after Susan's women's problems of 3 years ago, she'd lost the ability to enjoy intimacy with Carl. For his sake, she'd still laid down whenever he requested, but her lack of interest was soon apparent, and that completely put Carl off his stride. Surely Dave could understand why. When Carl and Susan explained their marital problems, she saw it as her duty as a friend to help them out 2 or 3 times a month. Couldn't he see she showed her respect for her husband by making sure his own marital love life had not suffered? Of course, this inevitably meant that Dave occasionally got sloppy seconds. She just couldn't bring herself to refuse him on days she'd been with Carl. After all, if she did that, it would be affecting their marital love life. She had further shown her respect for him by not letting him go down on her Carl days. That was fine, after all. It was her missing out, not him. Couldn't he see she'd protected him by being discreet? In the whole 3 years, only 3 other couples in their friend group knew about the whole affair and had to be sworn to secrecy. Melissa had simply beamed with pride when delivering this snippet. After all, Dave wouldn't want all his friends to think his wife was an unfaithful spouse, would he? Finally, couldn't he see why Susan, Carl, and she had kept it from him? After being married for so long, she knew her husband as well as herself. She knew his pride would find it extremely difficult to allow him to share her with another man. So she had skillfully saved him that angst by keeping it secret. All these justifications had been pre-prepared before the party. The one that took the whole 4 days of Dave's absence to justify was her response on being caught. In hindsight, her statement of "go away" could have been misinterpreted as indifference. In the end, her justification was that she had been caught up in the moment. In addition, imagine if the tables were turned. Put in Carl's place, would Dave have welcomed his orgasm being totally ruined? At the end of all this, she realized David wasn't impressed. In fact, he showed no reaction at all. Feeling remorse, this was when she'd asked him to forgive her and hoped they could get over it. There was never any doubt in her mind that it was only a matter of time and patience. Over the next 3 weeks, she gave him the space to come to terms with it in his own time. They never spoke of it again, but she was relieved that he was almost back to normal, except for the strange look in his eye. In hindsight, it was as if the pilot light had gone out. He was obviously still processing things as he hardly spent any time with her, but worked on his projects in the garage. Melissa could hear his cement mixer humming away at all hours. It never occurred to her to ask why there was never any fresh concrete. Over that time, the phone had rung hot. The couples in the know worried about Dave and Mel's marriage. The previously ignorant couples pumped her for information. Feeling bad for how it might look to the uninformed, she had bent the truth slightly. She told them that Dave was fully aware of the arrangement with Carl and Susan, but had requested that she abstain that weekend as it was their anniversary. She apologized that she had dishonored that request and that they, their friends, had to witness Dave's subsequent anger. Carl constantly asked Melissa if Dave was ready for him to apologize yet. Melissa advised him to hold off. With no intimacy from Dave, Melissa got Susan's blessing to increase her visits to Carl's bed to once a week at least. 3 weeks after the event, Melissa started putting pressure on Dave about the monthly party. It was their turn to host it. It was also time for them to show their friends that everything was back to normal and their friendship group could continue uninterrupted. She stressed that it was unfair for some of their friends to still be uncomfortable over events that had nothing to do with them. That was the first time she saw any sort of emotional reaction from Dave. He showed some excitement. Melissa remembered being relieved that he was finally ready to move on. The dates of their parties were set in stone, the last Saturday of every month. That was why it was unusual when 2 of the couples declined to come, citing previous engagements. It was a relief to Melissa that both fell into the previously ignorant category. No worries. Fewer people continue stretching the truth. Everyone else came, though, and the party started off very well. 30 minutes later, one of the other, previously ignorant couples left, saying something had come up. 20 minutes later, they were followed by a second. Suspicious, Melissa had kept a closer eye on the interactions between the remaining people. The mood in the house was noticeably quieter, which wasn't fully explained by the dwindling population. She watched Dave talking to Jenny and Frank from across the room. Being very perceptive, she saw the intense look on Dave's face and the downcast look on the faces of both his companions. Shaking his head, Dave moved on. Curious, Melissa followed him as he moved to Sandra and Bob. Again, the intense look from Dave. This time there were no downcast eyes but vigorous shaking of heads and animated conversation. 5 minutes later, Sandra bid Melissa good night and the couple left. To say Melissa was angry was an understatement. What right did David have to alienate their friends? She decided to give him a piece of her mind. She stormed into the kitchen to confront him. Carl, seeing the look of thunder on her face, followed her, disobeying her instructions to stay the hell away from David. "What the hell are you doing upsetting our friends? Can't you see you are embarrassing me?" "I'm sorry, dear. Just finding out who the innocent parties were and who the conspirators were." "Ah, Carl, welcome. I'm glad you're both here. In the spirit of fair play and in respect for our years of friendship, I must tell you that I am now going to the basement to retrieve my pistol from the safe. When I return, I will be shooting you both dead." With that, Dave turned and slipped out of the room. Carl tried to grab his arm, but Melissa held him back. "Come on, Carl. Let's get out of here." "You're not serious, Mel. He won't do it. He's just trying to get some payback by scaring us." "You didn't see his eyes, Carl. Dave has green eyes. That thing had black eyes. They were the eyes of a monster. I think we created that monster. We have to get out of here now." "What about Susan?" "Leave her. She's safe. It's us it wants." That was all Melissa remembered for the moment. With no more action replays, her attention returned to the television. "To all the family and friends of people who called themselves my friends but failed to alert me to what my darling wife was up to, my profound apologies. I hope I have sent a message to our society that this unacceptable behavior should be punished. With the media's help, this lesson could last for years. If nothing else, these loathsome creatures have been expunged from the gene pool." Finally, to my former friend Carl. 35 days after me, you are going to learn the same lesson I did. The one thing far worse than death is to abruptly lose the person you have loved unconditionally for so long. To have your heart torn from your chest and peed on while it is still beating. As I said to your cheating woman, good luck trying to explain the loss of their mother to your children, knowing in your heart that they believe it was all your fault. Your children can share in the last lesson I am giving mine, seeing how a real man dies. And good luck explaining it to all your other family and friends. I think history may judge that Susan got off lightly. Worse than death is a life spent regretting the suffering you have caused to so many. Goodbye, my friend. I'll see you in hell. Melissa lapsed into unconsciousness. Again, her mind vivid with suppressed memories. Of her dragging Carl out of the front door and hearing the deadlock click behind her. Upon reaching the other side of the street, where she briefly glanced over her shoulder to see Dave looking out the window at her. Of continued to run until the enormous explosion threw Carl and herself to the ground. How, just before she lost consciousness from the concussive blast wave, she instinctively dragged Carl under a truck to avoid the falling debris. The remembered pain woke her again. Now, back to today's top story. A house in Mort Crater was destroyed today in an enormous explosion. 2 people outside the house were injured, but are reported in a satisfactory condition. A police spokesman said it was believed at least 8 people were present in the house and are feared dead. This station has determined that the house belonged to David Brown, a shot firer at the local mine. More details will be released later. Melissa lapsed into blessed unconsciousness again, but those flashbacks just wouldn't leave her dreams. She remembered Dave telling her once about the most common explosive he used at work. It was simply a mixture of a common garden fertilizer and petrol or kerosene or some type of fuel. She'd asked him if it was easy to make, and he'd replied it was simple. You just had to thoroughly mix them somehow, say in a cement mixer, then get a detonator and booster to set them off. Finally, as a merciful cloak of darkness descended over Melissa, one last collage of despair played across her memory. In the shattered remnant of her mind, she saw again Dave standing at the window of their house. In his left hand, a small yellow box from which wires dangled. Behind him peered 7 worried faces, sharing their glances between the box in Dave's hand and the fleeing couple out the window. In her mind's eye, she saw Dave's green eyes shining as his face crinkled in a smile. She watched in slow motion as he raised the box in one hand and pressed a button with the other. 2 months later. Tonight on 10, in our regular public information segment, we were going to bring you an update on Carl Weston, the lover in the infamous Brown Weston tragedy. Unfortunately, due to his tragic suicide this week, we won't be able to. Instead, we will be bringing you an interview with Dora Smith, eldest daughter of Janet and Graham Smith, one of the couples who died in the Mort Crater explosion. Then we'll be bringing you an update on the spate of confession stories, divorces, and requests for counseling services flooding the country. The ACP reports the current waiting list for marriage counseling services has blown out to 3 months. Stay tuned. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.